What's going on, guys? Once again, we're not on the bench today. We are actually on another bench. This is my work bench that is outside. I just kind of wanted to do this outside today because it's a really pretty day, and it just seems like a waste to me to do something like this inside. So today we're gonna have a pretty basic video. It's just gonna be a basic how to use a multimeter. You know, I've been thinking about it, and I think it's a really good thing to do. It's a video I haven't done before on just your average Joe has never picked up a meter before. Now this is going to be strictly digital, it's not going to be analog, but just to show guys, you know, pretty much if you're clueless on a multimeter, these are the basics you need to know. You know, today I think we're going to try to just cover volts, ohms, continuity, and maybe some temperature. Later on we'll do current readings and things like that, and capacitance, but today is going to be just very basic. And one of the reasons that I want to do this is that I've got a new camera that I'm looking to break in. I'm really loving it so far. It's a Canon EOS Rebel T3i. So far it is a really awesome camera. I'm really loving it. It is miles ahead of that old webcam that I used to use. So part of this video is to break in this camera, and also it's kind of a little celebratory video because this is going to be my first video that I have over 100 subscribers. I believe right now I'm at 103, which is actually about 97 more than I ever thought I would have ever. So it's really awesome to see that people are interested. I'm getting more comments than I've ever gotten on any of my videos. Really good comments too, not just, you know, people who just say great video. You know, I appreciate that a lot. I really do. It really makes me feel good that, you know, people like what I'm putting out there. But I really love the discussion type comments. I really love the people that are putting information in or asking questions, you know, and teaching and learning. That's really what I want this channel to be about, is when you're done watching a video, you know a little bit more, or maybe you have more questions. For me, a lot of times when I don't know how to do something, it really boils down to I'm not asking the right people the right questions for me to learn. So, you know, it's a learning experience for me as well, and I've really enjoyed it. So, you know, once again, thank you for that. And let's get into the video. Alright, so I've got 4 meters here, and the reason that I've chosen these 4 is because, number one, the X-Tech, this is a manual ranging meter. Guys, I don't know why, but I'm going a little hoarse. And this is not going to be a comparison, don't worry. I've done a comparison video before. I actually feel like maybe I should go back and kind of redo that, because I think that I've gotten, anyways, by the way, this is a totally unscripted video, so I'm kind of letting ADD take the wheel. So if we end off on a totally different tangent, I apologize, but, you know, I'm just kind of having fun with it right now. But I want this in here just to kind of show the similarities of operation, because all these meters, and generally any digital multimeter you pick up, is going to operate basically the same as far as user interface goes. So that's why I have 4 of them, is to kind of show the similarities and the differences. The Fluke I have because, you know, this is a meter that a lot of people want and a lot of people own, and it's just something that, you know, this probably won't be, but may be your first meter. It does have a few little things that I find make it actually one of the easiest meters to use. The X-Tech Multi-Pro is here because this is kind of to me a general purpose meter that your average homeowner may find for a cheap price and pick up, and it's very similar. Most of the X-Techs are very similar to each other, and it tends to be a pretty popular just DIY brand, so that's why it's here. The Bryman is here because, well, honestly, this is turning into one of my favorite meters, and it's also a really easy to use meter, and really price wise, for the BM235 on eBay, they're going for about 120 bucks. And I mean, if you're going to invest in a meter, I really think that this is a good one. You know, it's definitely worth every penny. I don't really think it's too highly priced if it's something that you're going to be using a lot of. So, and it's also got a lot of functionality to it. That's the real reason, I guess you could say, that I have it out here, is that the functionality on it, you can really show some great stuff with it. So, let's say we're about to take a measurement. Let's just start off with voltage. What's the first thing we need to do with these meters? Well, you might think turn them on, but before that, this is very important, especially if your meter goes through some really rough service. We want to inspect these probes, because you have to keep in mind that this is what your hands are on, and if there's a defect in them, there's not a whole lot of distance between you and whatever it is you're measuring. And if you work with even 120 volts, you know, that's a painful shock. 220 hurts a whole lot. 480 you don't even want to know about. Just realize that you can measure extremely dangerous stuff with these meters, and the probes are really your first line of defense. So the inspections on them are really simple. You know, you don't have to go over it with a fine-tooth comb or magnifying glass. We're really just looking for any kind of defects in the insulation is the first thing, because if any conductor is exposed, you know, that can make contact with you or short out something else. So make sure your insulator's in good shape. Kind of check your strain relief, because you can, they do have a tendency that they'll start breaking inside of here. So you just want to make sure that your strain relief feels right. You're not going to really visually be able to see anything, but if it's loose and kind of floppy in there, and if you can, especially if you can twist the wire, don't put a whole lot of effort to it, but if you can grab these and twist and you can see that wire move really easily, that's a sign that these probes should probably be replaced. You want to check your tips. Just make sure they're clean and good condition so they'll conduct really well. Any arcs or anything like that, you know, that may happen. I'm not saying that you need to throw them away just because they've got little defects in them, but just be aware that it gets to a point where you will need to replace them if you have too much damage. Also, just give them a little shake, make sure that they're nice and tight. Check the banana jacks, the same thing for the strain reliefs, and also look inside. Make sure that the shrouds aren't tore up, and check the actual banana jack itself. You can kind of take your probe point and you can just try to shove it around a little bit and see if it actually moves. It may have a little bit of flex, but if it's really just flipping around in there, that's dangerous. Alright, so we've inspected our probes. Always connect your probes, preferably before you even turn the meter on, but definitely before you plug it into whatever you're trying to measure. While we're talking about plugging in the probes, you'll notice that all of these meters are 4-jack meters. You might be able to see, let me go ahead and zoom you in a little bit. Alright, so you can see on the X-Tech, or rather on the 383274, we're just going to call this in the X-Tech and this one the Multi-Pro. We have a 20 amp, milliamp, microamp, a common, and then volts, ohms, hertz jacks. All of these are pretty much going to be the same. You'll have a high current, low current, common, and then I just call this the volts jack. But generally your volts is going to be what you're plugged into 99% of the time, unless you measure a lot of current. But these two are only if you're taking current readings. Other than that, you're going to want to be in your common and your volts. And even when you're taking current readings, you will be plugged into the common. Guys, if you've also reached this point in the video and you're saying that you already know all this stuff that I've said so far, it's probably not going to get any better. So keep in mind, this is for people that have no clue how to use a multimeter. So I think for now, we'll probably just do some AC voltage measurement, because that is the nearest plug. And to turn these meters on, all of them except for the X-Tech, you turn your rotary switch and the meters automatically come on. For the X-Tech, there's actually a power button. Most of the time the power button will be red and have the symbol over it. It'll at least have the symbol on it, or it'll say on, off, something like that. And if you look, every mode, every single one is kind of different in this respect. The MultiPro has a separate volts AC and volts DC. The Fluke also has a separate volts AC and volts DC. The Bryman has a combined volts AC and volts DC. And if you look at it, it's not even in scene. But if you take a look at the Bryman, you can notice that it has a combination function here. So it is volts AC and volts DC. If you run into these meters, it's just another little thing to remember, but it's really not a big deal. But this select button, sometimes it'll say function. Sometimes it'll actually say, you know, AC, DC, something like that. But you'll just push that button and it'll put you in AC mode. And I believe that this meter also remembers the last mode you were in. So it doesn't default to either one. So a minor inconvenience is you have to always realize, whenever you turn this meter on, check whether you're measuring AC or DC on the meter. That is one of the reasons that I do actually prefer the Fluke and the MultiPro, because it is a little bit easier to use, to just intuitively know volts AC, volts DC. For the X-Tech, you can see that it has a AC DC button, but before we push that, we need to go into our volts mode. Now on manual ranging multimeters, most of the time they'll count up by tens, and they'll also tend to, the ranges will tend to be matching what the number of counts are for it. So this is, I believe this is a 2000 count meter, which means that it'll do 1.999 on the display. So you'll see that it's 200 millivolts, and then 2 volts, 20 volts, 200 volts, 750 AC, and 1000 DC. Now there's two different ways that you can use this meter. If you know your voltage, like we know that we're going to be under 200, so we can go straight into this 200 volt range. We'll make sure that we're in AC. We push the button and we're in AC mode. Or you can start off at the highest range, measure, and once you know kind of where you're at just generally, then you can start tuning your resolution in by dialing down that range. Now, if you start off low and it overranges, it'll just tell you that it's overranged. We'll demonstrate that in a minute, and you can just go up a range. You're not going to blow this meter up by simply being in the lowest range. It'll simply tell you, hey, you can't measure that high in this range. So right now, all of these meters are essentially set for the same measurement. One of them doesn't seem happy. Maybe it's about to turn off. It just beeped. So let's go ahead and check some voltage. Alright guys, it goes without saying, if you're going to try this, you do so at your own risk. I'm not liable for any injuries, blah 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 blah. There'll be a big safety thing in the video description. If you don't want to read that, then just know that you're doing this on your own. Now, to take these measurements on the AC, we're not going to be worried about polarity. So it doesn't matter black or red going into whichever prong, which you probably can't really see too well. But we're mainly just showing the operation of a meter. We're not really showing how to take measurements safely. So just make sure your probe tips don't cross. And you can see that we're kind of ghosting around a little bit. That's because I'm not making very good contact in this plug. There we go. So we're reading 125 volts. Let's see what happens whenever we range down. It tells us overload or over limit. So we know we just have to range up. And that's how easy it is to take a measurement on AC voltage. Okay, let's take the same measurement with the Bryman. As you can see, it just takes care of itself. It does its own ranging. It does so very quickly. And this measurement matches what the X-Tech came up with. So 124.9, that's very good. So since we've already covered AC voltage, we kind of already have an idea of what we need to do to measure DC voltage. On the Bryman, you actually have to kind of go through a couple selections because it does have a VFD mode. But once we see this symbol here, we know this is our DC symbol. And let me see if I can get this for y'all. There we go. It's just a line, a straight line with 3 dashed lines under it. For the multi-pro, we switch into VDC mode. For the X-Tech, there's an AC-DC button, a dedicated one. I'm sorry, let me focus that up for y'all. And for the Fluke, there is a volts DC. Now there is another DC voltage function, which is millivolts. We're not going to go into that today. I don't have anything that can do millivolts on this bench. So just know that there will be a part 2 coming, and we'll cover millivolts and capacitance, current readings, all that. Alright, so we've got all of our meters in DC mode. We have a DC power supply. This is an 18-volt battery. And it's really hard to tell. I don't think the camera will be able to pick it up. But there's a positive and a negative on this battery. Positive being to the left, negative being to the right. And this is where polarity starts to matter. We're going to want our black probe, which is on our common, to be our negative. And we're going to want our positive, our red probe, which is on our volts jack, to be our positive. And I don't think that I can get in there with these. So as you can see, we have 18.39 volts. And if you notice, there is no negative symbol here. That's another way to kind of tell you what your polarity is. If you're not sure of a polarity on something, you can actually use the meter to tell you whether or not you're on a ground, whether or not which is ground and which is your high or your low. So we can tell that by simply reversing it on here. Let's get in there. You can see now that our negative symbol has showed up. So we know that we're reading DC voltage, but it's technically flowing backwards. So the red probe we know is going to be our ground this time, and the black probe is going to be our are high voltage. High, low, positive. We're not getting into that right now. And that's pretty much how easy it is to take a DC measurement. This stuff is really simple, guys. Once you've seen it, it's easy. Alright, let's talk about continuity and resistance. There's a lot of similarities between them, but there's also some big differences that will make you choose which one you're actually going to use for which situation. Now, one of the main differences that people will know pretty much right off the bat is that whenever you're in continuity mode and you find a closed loop circuit or touch your probes together, the meter will beep. The Bryman will also light up and blink. The Multi-Pro just beeps. The X-Tech just beeps, and the Fluke also beeps. Bryman, I think, is one of the few meters that actually will light up. For the Fluke to go into continuity mode, I forgot about this. You do actually have to be in this function, and there's a button to push that will actually take it in and out of continuity mode. So another little difference, something to be on the lookout for. Now, the thing that a lot of people don't realize is if we go into continuity mode, if we close that circuit, yeah, that's fine. You'll notice that we're also getting an ohms measurement. In this case, it's 0.1, which is very, very low. That's just the resistance of the leads. We'll kind of get into this resistance measurement later whenever we do actual resistance. But just keep in mind that your probes do actually have some resistance in them. It's normally very, very low. And in fact, if it is unusually high, it's probably time to get rid of those probes. Okay, another really major difference in continuity and resistance modes is that while continuity will give you a resistance measurement, it won't actually trigger your buzzer unless that measurement is a low enough value. To demonstrate that, we'll use this resistance box. Now you'll notice that it's not buzzing. This is actually a closed circuit, but right now we've got 47 kilo ohms of resistance in that circuit. It has to be below a certain threshold, and I believe each meter is different. We're not going to actually measure each one. I'm just going to demonstrate the principle of it. But you have to have that resistance low enough. See right here, we're 1 kilo ohm, and we'll just keep dialing that back until we get a beep. Okay, so at 220 ohms is whenever we finally get that beep. That is something that is very important to keep in mind, that whenever you're measuring, if you're trying to find an open or a closed circuit, technically the circuit may still be closed, but it may not have a low enough resistance to trigger continuity mode. So just bear that in mind. You may think that you have an open circuit problem, but you may not. You may just have a resistance problem. I thought that that was a really important thing to know. So it was something I never knew, and when I found out about it, it made a lot more stuff make sense to me. Okay, so let's go ahead and go into resistance. I am going to just use the Bryman from this point on as my demonstration model. All the other ones will just kind of follow suit, just to show how each one is used. So on the Bryman, once again, multi-purpose function here. So select button will put us into the ohms mode. Same thing with the multi-pro, we just push the select button. For the X-Tech, for the manual ranging, we just have to flick it from continuity diode check, we'll go into diode check later, into our resistance. Now, this manual ranging on this is going to be the same thing as manual ranging on voltages. You can start off high if you want, you can start off low. Resistance, it really depends on your personal preference. I tend to start lower on resistance if I use a manual ranging meter and work my way up. That way, whenever it quits overloading the meter, I'm in the best resolution possible. Let's go ahead and let's leave it on 200 right now. For the fluke, you'll simply push the button to take it out of continuity mode, and you'll notice that our little buzzer, the little buzzer doesn't show up on the X-Tech, I'm sorry. But there's a small buzzer that will appear and disappear when you're in continuity mode. Some meters you can actually turn the beeper off for continuity mode. I don't have any that actually do it, but I have seen some that do. Very, very odd feature to have, but whatever floats your boat. Alright, so whenever we're measuring resistances, the same thing as continuity mode. It's also not polarity sensitive on resistance. And you'll see that we're reading about 220 ohms, 330. Now you'll see right here, whenever we shift from 470 ohms, which is actually 480, to the 680, this is a 6,000 count meter, and you see how it drops down from reading the actual 480.9 ohms to reading 0.674 K. Now the K is kilo ohms. And we can keep going, and we will range shift soon. And you'll see now we're 100.0 kilo ohms. So just the higher your range is, the less resolution you get. It's normally not a big deal for pretty much anything that you're going to actually be measuring. It's kind of an accepted practice for multimeters. If you want high resolution on a meter, you'll have to get a meter that has a higher count, or you'll hear people call, you know, a 5.5 digit, 4.5 digit, 6.5 digit, and I mean they go higher than that. But generally, unless you're, you know, an electrical engineer that's doing very specific designs, you're not going to need super high resolution. For your average Joe, a 2,000 count, 6,000 count is a very good meter for your average Joe. 2,000 is perfectly usable too, though. Alright, for the X-Tech, for the manual range, right now we're in the 200 ohms range, but we know that we're reading around 680 ohms. And actually, let's switch that to the 220 kilo ohms actually, so that we can actually, no, let's do 100 kilo ohms. Alright. Guys, I'm telling you, ADD is like a blast to have. I mean that in all sincerity. You notice once we get into this 200 kilo ohm range, we start reading. It's really just that simple. Alright, I think now we'll talk about some accessories. Some meters may have them, they may come with them, you may buy some. But the first one we'll talk about is going to be our temperature function. Now, the Multi-Pro does not have temperature, and you really have to look at what you're doing, what you're planning on doing with a meter to know if you need one with temperature. A lot of meters nowadays are coming with them, and they come with these K-type probes. So I'm just going to cover it in case you have it and in case you ever need to use it. One of the first things to note is that these are all K-type temperature probes. Some of them do use a different type of connector, and you can get adapters for them. Some of them may come with the different connector, the smaller connector, and an adapter. Some meters have a specific K-type probe location, but the most important thing is to know whether or not your K-type probe is polarity sensitive, and a lot of them are. You'll see this one, I think is going to be our clearest one, actually has a positive and a negative. Now, just like DC measurements, positive is red. Sorry. The autofocus isn't really what I want it to be on this camera, but it's really nice to have just a manual focus that I can tune into. But positive is red, and common or black is going to be our ground or negative. And if you do have a meter with a dedicated K-type jack, I've never seen one that can use both the common and the volts and the K-type. You're gonna have to go with just the K-type. But just make sure there's a positive and a negative, there's a polarity noted on there, that you just have the polarity right. And then go ahead and go into temperature mode, which is all the way over here. And same thing, the temperature is auto ranging on here. So the 200 degrees Fahrenheit range is, you know, plenty enough for ambient temperature. We're not boiling water today, so we'll be fine. And you can see that when I put my fingers on the tip of this probe, this is where the measurement happens. So you want to make sure that wherever you want to take a temperature measurement, you have to get the tip of that probe into that area. But you can see I can warm it up. It responds fairly quickly, and then it'll cool off fairly quickly. And if we go to, I believe both the Bryman and the Fluke can do Celsius as well as Fahrenheit. For the Bryman, I think that the Bryman does the same thing that it does for AC/DC volts, and that it remembers defaults. So it knows that the last time I went here, I was measuring temperature in Fahrenheit, and I can cycle through and do millivolts AC/DC, temperature Celsius, and temperature Fahrenheit. Once again, polarity sensitive. This one actually has a little red dot that marks positive, as well as a plus and a minus. And it just uses the input jacks. And there we have the temperature. I'm telling you guys, there's not much to be scared of with these meters as far as learning how to use them. For simple measurements, I mean, they're called simple measurements for a reason. And here we can see Celsius. Growing up with Fahrenheit, I still have trouble associating, you know, 33 degrees with 75 degrees Fahrenheit. I should probably try to get a little bit better at that, but Fahrenheit is just what I've always used. If it makes you feel any better, people that use the metric system, I do really like the metric ton, and also millimeters. I use those a whole lot. It's just temperature wise, meh. I'm not a meteorologist or anything. So that's pretty much as simple as it is to take regular temperature measurements. I think we'll do a little bit of accessories here. A lot of meters will come with alligator clips. Now some alligator clips, and you may have to also look at your probes, will just slip on, which I believe these do. They just slip on. You have to, you know, make sure and be aware that the probe itself is actually engaging into the female part of the alligator clip so that you get good contact. And other than that, really simple. You just clip it on. I probably use this a lot for batteries. A lot of the batteries that I use are kind of the marine type, and they'll have wing nuts and things like that. And it's really handy to be able to clip on to that battery and go around checking other things so you'll have a good ground. Some clips are screw-on type. I may not have grabbed a screw-on type. It doesn't look like it did. This one looks like a press-on too. But I mean, they're just as easy to use. You'll just push them in and just turn them. You don't have to wrench them down really tight, you know, just finger tight, just a little bit snug so where they make good contact, but just don't over tighten them. I do actually kind of prefer the screw on, but I do also like the convenience of the push on because it literally takes 1 second and you're done. There's all sorts of type of little clips and stuff you can get. Another really good set to have that I really like are these, which are kind of little claw grips. They're really good if you're getting into a tight space and you need to grab a wire or something like that. And the way that these work is that there's actually a banana jack in the back side of it, and you have to get a set of probes like these are the Fluke shear grips, I want to say. Which, by the way, Fluke, why would you make these things only available in 4 feet long? Can I please get a set of 36-inch shear grips? I would love that. Thank you, bye. Rant over. But you'll just unplug these probes and plug these in. Really convenient, really nice to have, and really easy to use. Really, 4 feet of probe. This is 48 inches. It sounds great until you work on a bench that's 2 foot deep and you don't need that much. Come on, Fluke. Again. Guys, I think that's pretty much going to be it for today. Oh, one more thing to show. If you're working with things like these input jacks, this is kind of sort of related to meters, but not really. Some of them you can plug in unshrouded banana plugs. Well, on all of them you can. And some of them, if you unscrew them, and this is what I was doing earlier, there's some little holes that are exposed whenever you unscrew them, and your multimeter probes fit perfectly in there, and then you just tighten it down. And once again, just snug, just to where you make good contact. Or you can actually put a bare bit of wire in there and tighten it down. Or you can use a like a spade terminal, like a fork type spade terminal. Just a handy little thing to know. But I believe that is going to be it for today. Thanks for watching. I will make a part 2 that goes into taking capacitance measurements, checking diodes, using relative function and things like that. Probably could have covered relative function here, but I feel like this video is already going to be longer than I really wanted it to be. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. If you've never used a multimeter before, this should be enough to get you started. These are the basic things that I use every day. You know, your volts, your ohms, continuity, and temperature. So, you know, this will at least get you on your feet. Maybe not running, but you'll be taking little baby steps. So thanks for watching. Thanks again for 100 subscribers, guys. I'm telling you, it really blows my mind that I can fumble my way through a video and people actually be interested in it. once again, stay tuned for part 2. If you're not subscribed to this channel and you came on to learn how to use a multimeter, subscribe. I screw up a whole bunch of stuff. It's fun for me to do, and I hope fun for y'all to see. And yeah, like, share, all that stuff. No Facebook, no Instagram yet. I'm not a celebrity or anything, so I don't think I deserve that. But anyways, guys, I will see y'all later.